I recently had the privilege of conversing with Ben Hunt of Epsilon Theory fame. Ben, along with his co-founder Rusty Guinn, has been a prolific writer over the years. Initially focusing on financial markets, Epsilon Theory has expanded its coverage to include topics spanning economics, politics, and culture. The breadth of topics is tied together by a unique thread, a systematic study of narrative. There are so many factors that drive human behavior, whether in financial markets or society broadly. Ben's claim: narrative is an invisible factor which drives behavior and which can be measured and understood. In fact, the way I see it, Epsilon Theory is not just a blog about finance, politics, or culture. Rather, it is a project exploring how narratives drive human behavior at scale. Over the years, Ben and Rusty have developed a kind of science of narrative, exploring how different semantic structures influence our thoughts and actions without us even realizing it. Recently, Ben has been pondering how the explosion in computer intelligence, via accelerating advancements in large language models, will influence how our societies create and handle narratives. That's what we focused on in this discussion, which we are hoping to expand into a part two soon. As a quick note to the viewer, we did experience some technical difficulties during this call. There was some distracting audio feedback, which we weren't able to completely eliminate during the call itself. Our amazing video editor, Jacqueline, figured out how to dampen the feedback, though you may still hear it in this recording. As the saying goes, we live and we learn. We'll make sure to improve our audio tech for future recordings, and we thank you and Ben for your patience. And of course, thank you for your time. So without further ado, please enjoy the discussion.
Second Foundation Partners, we're trying to do research on, I'll call it the structure in unstructured data.
Okay.
And that's the source of pretty much everything I write about, because it's amazing once you start looking at the stories we tell each other. And that's what I mean by structure in the unstructured data. There are patterns and stories. There are semantic structures, to use another $10 phrase, that exist below the surface of all the words we use when we write and we talk and we listen and we hear. So it's understanding that underlying semantic dimension, the dimension of story, of narrative, of archetype, that I think is just so exciting. It's a real new frontier in science that the development of large language models powerfully transforms. So it's an exciting time. That's what I do.
Totally. Yeah, I remember when I first stumbled onto Epsilon Theory. This was several years ago, maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, even maybe. And the distinct feeling I got as I was reading through, all the different concepts that you were developing, you and Rusty, it was almost this feeling of like, the David Foster Wallace speech, "This is water."
Hmm.
And it's like you were trying to like poke your head outside of the narrative ocean that we're swimming in and try to figure out like how do we make sense of this, things that seem kind of like not necessarily arbitrary, but it's like we're not very conscious of the different kind of patterns that influence our behavior, the way we absorb information, and kind of how that sort of drives behavior, and have this insight that maybe this could actually be predictable, like we could actually understand this, and sort of consciously engage with this process, which is really fascinating. And then I think you've developed various concepts that have been very influential in my thinking, and I was kind of hoping that that's where we could really jump off this conversation, is kind of digging into the sort of science of narrative that you're developing. Maybe we can start with this question of like, you kind of answered a little bit as to like what is narrative. It's the sort of underlying structure in unstructured data. How how can we now go about making sense of it? How can we analyze it and sort of understand it more deeply?
Well, I love that you mentioned the David Foster Wallace commencement speech that he gave, because I use that a lot in my talks, my presentations. For those of your listeners who haven't heard it, as the story goes, uh, there are these two young fish swimming along, and they come across an older fish swimming the other way. And the older fish says,
Morning, boys. How's the water? And the two young fish look at it, whatever, Gramps. Yeah, it's fine. We're doing fine. And they swim along. And then one of the younger fish looks at the other one and says, what the hell is water? And so words, the storytelling, it really is the water in which we swim. And I think that's such an important framework for understanding narrative and stories and the linguistics that we are hardwired to respond to, the linguistic patterns, uh, because it is invisible to us. We really are physically evolved and socially trained not to hear the stories. Give you a quick example. So I've been studying this stuff for 35 years, and it can make me insufferable at times when I'm talking about this stuff, like movies. So every movie you've ever seen has a structure, a semantic structure to it. You can go online, type in whatever movie you like, plus three-act play structure, and you'll get a flow chart, basically. And all of these flow charts look identical. I mean, literally identical for when, at what point in the act a specific character is introduced, what's called rising action, falling action, when's the climax, when is it's all not just scripted, but it's all structured in a very specific way. So I know that, right? I know I can tell you, well, at halfway through Act One, the MacGuffin, the object of desire, will be introduced. I mean, it really is halfway through Act One in every movie. That's when the MacGuffin is introduced. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. But when I sit down to watch a movie, I forget it. I lose myself in the storytelling, in the movie itself. And we're all that way. And when I'm talking about watching a movie, substitute in reading a website, reading the news, hearing some CEO talk to you on an earnings call, um, listening to your spouse, talk about his or her day. They all have scripts and structures underneath them. It's like the current in a water, right? All bodies of water have currents flowing through them. And so the first thing is to try to step back and to say, okay, there are currents in the water. The water exists. And to be aware of it, just being aware of it is a huge step. It really is, because you understand that the way you communicate to others and the way others communicate to you has this underlying structure to it. That even if you can't see it, feel it, taste it, knowing it's there gives you, what's the right way to say it? A critical distance, an ability to separate yourself from the magic spell, the hard wiring that we all humans have to respond to certain semantic structures. So that's the goal here. And then, like I say, with the advances of first big data, the ability to get all this linguistic information, all the text, just in a big fire hose delivered to you every day, the advent of big compute, the ability to just tap into the wall for AWS or any of the Azure, any of the cloud services, just like you plug into the wall electricity. That's the big advance number two. And then the third is to have as an engine, a processing engine for yourself, these large language models, which are built on the concept of semantic structure. That's how large language models work. That's how they work. They see the connections, the semantic connections in human language. So you put those three things together: big data, big compute, and then large language models. our ability to see and measure this heretofore invisible dimension of water, the water in which we swim, is right there for us. And that's what I try to write about. I think more importantly is what we try to do research on.
No, that's excellent, and that's such an interesting way of framing it. That in a way, the large language models are sitting in a place that's sort of like transcendent to the currents in which we're stuck in. Um, uh,
Well, Nimayi, so if you read the white papers of the
yeah,
OpenAI people or the Meta people, whoever you're looking at,
sure,
the researchers here,
yeah,
the large language modelers,
yeah,
they talk very specifically about the semantic dimension,
yeah, yeah,
right? Because that's
yeah,
that's the dimension on which the transformers are organized, or
yeah,
on which they act.
yeah.
It just happens to be in a dimension that's not, it's accessible to us out of the corner of our eye, but
Mhm,
it's not something that we see or perceive directly. What we
yep.
perceive directly are topics
Mhm,
uh,
mhm,
and sentiment.
mhm,
Right. So when you've seen a lot of work, you know, tried to be a lot of work done on sentiment analysis
mhm,
and a
mhm,
lot of work done on topic clustering, because
mhm,
those both sit on the surface of
mhm,
unstructured data.
mhm,
So a lot of people do it. I honestly, I don't think you get many meanings of sentiment analysis as somebody using nice words or mean words. I don't think
mhm,
you get much, many insights out of topic clustering.
mhm,
Going one layer deeper to that
mhm,
semantic dimension, the
mhm,
native dimension of large language models,
mhm,
I think you can get a lot of interesting signals there.
mhm. So let me, I mean, there's so many directions we can go with this. So let me ask this question. My understanding, I have a very naive understanding of machine learning, deep learning, things of that nature. But my basic understanding is that it is finding it is finding patterns in data and it is finding structure in data without necessarily being told exactly what to look for. It's sort of inferring it through a process of inference. Um, and my understanding is that it's very hard to interpret some of the deep learning models that are working on some of the most unstructured data available, the kinds of patterns and structures that they're coming up with that are then getting embedded in these large language models. They're not so easily interpretable by, let's say, the human intellect. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong on that front. But if that's the case, like how can we make these structures understandable to ourselves? Like, are there, like you mentioned, the MacGuffin, right? That's like a concept. Okay, I can make sense of it. Now I know the MacGuffin to look out for it. I can, and then when it shows up in the movie, it's like, okay, that's the MacGuffin. Now I can have that kind of intellectual relationship with it. I can be aware of what it's trying to do to me subconsciously. Are there more such concepts that are tractable to us? That you can tell us about, like semantic structures you've discovered that we can then sort of have that in our awareness, and then when we see it, we can sort of identify it, we can note it, we can label it. Have you done any work in that space, like cataloging the different kinds of semantic structures that have a big influence on us?
Yeah, so the semantic structures are, semantics just means meaning, right? So almost really by definition, a semantic structure has meaning to us
Mhm,
humans.
mhm,
So the semantic structures are the way in which the machine intelligence, which you're right, is inference based.
mhm,
The semantic structures are the link, right? It's the think of it as the mask
mhm,
that the Shoggoth monster that is, an AI, the mask that it puts on so that it is now intelligible, so that what its response to an input that makes sense, has meaning to humans. Now, the way that the large language models are designed, which is
an inferential effort to predict. It's a probabilistic effort to understand what word comes next. So here's an input. Let's do a probabilistic effort to understand what word comes next in the AI response to that prompt or that input. Well, for that response to have meaning,
the probabilistic training then follows a semantic structure. Right? So that's what I mean when I say that the large language models, their native dimension is semantic structures, because that's how they communicate with us. Right? If the goal is respond in a way that has meaning to humans, then the probabilistic effort
is then channeled through these semantic structures.
It really is like a current in water. The body of water is there.
Mm-hmm.
How it flows, how it has then purpose and impact on humans
is through these semantic structures, these currents that are set up. So now, to your question, have we discovered semantic structures? No. So that's not it at all.
Right? So semantic structures, stories, you know them, I know them, we all share the same stories. Entire, not just industries, but core pillars of human society have built up around
these finite number of stories that we all know. And the two social structures that immediately come to mind for me are Hollywood, by which I mean entertainment media, including books, TV. That's what I mean by Hollywood, right? And Wall Street, by which I mean all financial services and the flow of money through financial services.
Yeah.
Both of these institutions, Hollywood and Wall Street, are built on semantic structures. They both have a finite number of scripts, a finite number of structural elements, like the 3-act play for
every movie and television, scripted television show you've ever seen. Every one of them is structured in 3 acts. Every one of them has this concept of rising action and falling actions. It's everything you've ever seen has that structure. It's the same one Wall Street. Every report you've ever read, every analysis of a company you've ever read, there are a finite number of structures. Right?
So, there's an old saying, there are only 5 scripts in Hollywood.
Yeah.
An example of one of them is the hero's
journey. Right. So the hero's journey is one of our oldest semantic structures.
We all know what it is. It can be expressed in 1,000 different ways. It can be expressed in
the Lord of the Rings movie. It can be expressed in the Star Wars movies. It can be expressed in the Iron Man movies. It's all the same story, though. It's the same in Wall Street. It's the same with investing. So it's we're bullish on the new thing. There are hundreds of ways to say that, and obviously thousands of new things that you could say it about.
Yeah.
But it's always the same story. It always has the same structure and the same elements to it. So it's not that somebody is, when you hear the story, I'm bullish on the new thing.
It's not that you should think, oh, they're lying to me. That's not it, right? It's not fake news.
What it is you need to recognize that the story, what you are hearing, is being, I'm not going to call it intentionally designed, although in many cases, particularly today, it is intentionally designed to follow a specific story arc.
Yeah.
But it's just for you to recognize that, oh my goodness, this sounds like a great story. It does sound like a great story.
And I'm not saying it is not a great story. I'm not saying you should avoid it.
I'm saying, though, that you need to have some critical distance so that you understand you are physically hardwired to respond positively to a story that follows a semantic structure closely.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. So basically, it's like when people say I was moved by this movie, or I was that feeling of being moved is essentially the semantic structure interacting with our subconscious hardwiring, and perhaps it could compel certain kinds of behavior. It could compel our thoughts in a certain direction. And I guess that's what you're saying. That's what we have to be careful. We have to like see that process happening. You have to be aware of that that kind of a process happening. Is that
Well, we have this phrase when you go see a movie that you suspend disbelief. And this is what I was referring to, that when I watch a movie, I sit down and I know all these facts about how structure is, but you can't enjoy a movie if you're always thinking about, this comes
yeah.
in the
Yeah, totally.
three-act play structure.
Yeah.
So what we do
is we suspend disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great.
Yeah.
When you've paid your, I was going to say $8, but it's probably more like $15, right, to go see a movie today. That's great. I want to be entertained.
Mm-hmm.
It's less great when we suspend our disbelief for a politician talking to us.
It's less great when we suspend disbelief when we have a newscaster speak to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's less great when we suspend disbelief when somebody pitches us an
investment.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is not that these are lies or wrong, or there's no truth to it.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is that
I think it's important to preserve your autonomy of mind,
that
you can appreciate a story for the way it moves you to your point.
Yeah.
And in areas where we need to have some sort of, I'll call it neutrality or some sort of distance, it's important
for us to be able to capture that distance as well and not give our heart to an organization or a corporation or a political party we really shouldn't be giving our hearts to.
Right. No, it makes total sense. So I'm wondering, like, is this something that can be introduced into, let's say, education, where we could teach people, here are the 12 to 17 different semantic structures that are very influential on the human mind. Teach people to kind of recognize them when they show up in different domains, and recognize when they may be, when you should be skeptical and maybe this is being used to sort of manipulate your emotions, versus when this is actually something useful to immerse yourself in because maybe it's inspiring or uplifting and can motivate pro-social behavior or something. Is that kind of where you're thinking this science can go, or
so let me
possibility?
suggest three avenues to explore once we kind of get the concept of there's a semantic structure layer that's not immediately visible to us, but that's really important to at least understand is there. And once you understand it's there, I think there are three avenues to go. The first
is, I think, what you were suggesting, which is, all right, can you fit me with a pair of glasses so maybe I can see
that semantic structure?
Right.
Could you do that for me? Answer, yes,
absolutely. So we do this, we call it Fiat News. It's free, it's on our website. And it is, in fact, 15 different,
Plato and Socrates would have called it sophistry, right?
15 different linguistic techniques,
like an appeal to an authority. Experts say blah 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 blah. Again, not saying it's a lie, But I'm saying that when somebody says experts say,
They are trying to nudge you. They are trying to trigger a semantic structure you have in your head of, all right, when an authority figure says something in our human wiring, we pay attention to it.
so we've got these 15, you can call it sophistry, nudging, we call it fiat news.
Got it.
Right? So it's not fiat money.
It's fiat news, not fake news, but it's opinion presented as news. So yeah, that's number one. Kind of can you give me a pair of glasses to see this?
Yeah.
That'd be one.
Yeah.
Two is,
All right, you know what? I get it that people respond to storytelling. I have some ideas, investment ideas, or I have some political ideas. Let me focus on investment ideas, right? So I've,
you're an investor. You think
I think nat gas is
something that I really want to take a look at. I think it could be a really important big struggle in the future. I think, the molecule is something that makes a lot, it's the price of it makes sense. It's really, whatever your kind of rationale, your thesis is.
but you're thinking, when do I buy nat gas futures? And so one way I think you could look at it is, well,
what are the stories about nat gas that are out there for everyone to read? Are the stories growing in influence? Are they dying in influence? Well, if they're growing, maybe I want to buy it now. If they're dying down and nobody's talking about it or paying attention,
Right.
maybe I want to wait. So there's an instrumental use for understanding the waxing and waning of these semantic structures. So number one is, I'll call it pair of glasses so you can see it, so you can kind of maintain that critical distance. Number two is instrumental. Hey, I'd like to use these.
Yeah,
number three, let me just tell you the number three.
Totally.
We can talk about any of these, but
Yeah.
number three is kind of the weirdest one of all, but I think it's the most important.
Okay.
These semantic structures that I'm talking about, the stories that we hear from other people, crucially important. We immerse in it all the time.
Yeah.
The most important stories in our lives, though, are the stories we tell ourselves. Are the stories we tell ourselves. In fact, what I want to suggest to you, that who you are,
who I am, is the amalgamation of the stories that we have told ourselves. And I really do believe it's possible to measure, to actually replicate that storytelling that we do with ourselves. And what's possible here, I really do think, in the same way that people talk about creating digital agents of behaviors or types of people, I think it's actually possible to make a digital twin of yourself, of your parents, of your grandparents, so that when they're gone, when I'm gone, there is an important essence of myself that can be queried and talked to, spoken with by my children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren. I know this is kind of a woo thing,
but I don't think people are giving adequate consideration to what is possible by those three things I mentioned at the beginning.
Big data, and it can be a lot of data about ourselves. Big compute, the ubiquitous, cheap ability to have infinite processing power. And then language models that can understand the semantic structures that are embedded in a data set, unstructured data, including the unstructured data of our lives.
Mhm.
So those are the big three uses, I think. One is kind of like a protect yourself with a pair of glasses so you can maintain that critical distance. The other is, let's use these as signals to try to instrumentally do something in the world. And the third is, let's understand the semantic structures of our own consciousness and think about what that means for preserving that consciousness, which I think really is such a powerful way to reclaim the power of family, of humanity.
Anyway, I can go on and on.
No.
Those are
I want to double click on this, and you're giving me a great framework, I think, where we can sort of. I know you have a hard stop soon, so I want to be mindful of your time, but I think this is a great way for us to, you know, kind of bring the contemporary situation and the possibilities in the contemporary situation into this framework that you've set up. But just before I jump into that, I did want to ask you something quickly, if you can address it, and tell me if you think we're in very abstract territory here. So tell me if you think the question is off pitch. Yeah, it's like when you were mentioning the instrumental side of it, it was like, oh, this is the science Newton was missing when he's like, I can calculate the the movement of planets, but not the madness of men or whatever. It's like he was just missing. He was missing Epsilon Theory.
Yeah, no, he was missing, big data, but it's
Yeah.
all good. It's
Okay,
all
he was
good.
missing big
He
data.
was on
Fair
the
enough.
right track. He was on the
Okay,
right.
he's on the right track. It seems like this semantic structure stuff is very tightly linked with the questions of epistemology, right? Like how do we arrive at what is fundamentally true, right? How do we know truth, intellectually within our own minds? And I just want to be clear: is it, because obviously there is something going on. There is something going on in the world. There is something happening. In theory, you should be able to model it as a kind of a story or some kind of pattern of cause and effect. Like, are there some semantic structures which are healthier and more likely to get you to a relationship with truth versus others that are more likely to lead to sophistry? I don't know if you've thought about, like, for example, one could argue, my group believes this, so I believe it. That kind of like tribal affiliation kind of thing. Maybe is one kind of way of or like you were saying, appeal to authority. But then maybe the scientific method is another kind of. I don't know if this would qualify as a semantic structure or not, but it's like
Absolutely does. Totally does.
So I'm going to make a prediction about what is going to unfold based on my hypothesis of the relationships, and then if that happens, it's true. If it doesn't happen, I have to revisit my understanding. Like, are there some semantic structures that are more likely to get us to a relationship with reality versus others, or is it all just context dependent? In certain contexts, they work, in other contexts they don't. What do you think about that?
Well, what I think is that I'm a pretty hardcore Bayesian, and that
Okay.
and what I mean by that is that
When you think about information
Mhm.
and the transfer of information, the communication of information, and this is true for any information.
structure doesn't matter, right?
What I mean by being a Bayesian is that I think that the strength of information is not whether it is true with a capital T,
Okay.
but the degree to which it changes prior beliefs.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So I think that it's difficult to talk about truth with a capital T or an answer with a capital A.
Mhm.
I do think it's useful, and I want to come back to that word useful,
Yeah.
to talk about process with a capital P.
Right.
So I don't think that there are any semantic structures that by their nature get one closer to the truth with a capital T or an answer with a capital A.
Yeah.
I think that some semantic structures are more capable of changing your mind, changing your priors. I think some semantic structures are more powerful.
Right.
And I think that all semantic structures should be judged in context, use the word context, but in how useful they are and useful to whom.
Yeah.
Right? So I can give you a number of semantic structures like that appeal to authority that I was giving you earlier. It's a powerful semantic structure.
Yeah.
It is useful to the proclaimer, the advertiser, to the state, to the entity, the power entity that's trying to convince you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is not particularly useful
To you yourself.
right? It's a,
Or at least in the modern world, right? Where we're not out hunting and gathering. I think it has limited usefulness as a story you tell yourself. So, long answer to a very good question. But no, I don't think that semantic structures are necessarily more or less
truthful.
I think they are more or less powerful. And I think that they all have differing usefulness.
Totally.
And so understanding usefulness and understanding how effective it is, I think those are the dimensions you want to try to evaluate these.
No, I think, and in a way, it's like maybe it's semantic structures all the way down, where it's like you're proposing we relate to reality and the understanding of reality as a continuous process. That itself is maybe the idea of a capital T truth, like a one narrative to rule them all, is itself a semantic structure that people become, how do I say, mesmerized by, and they think that is what we're trying to achieve. Whereas somebody who's approaching it as a process is always learning.
We are so hardwired to respond positively to someone who tells us they have the answer with a capital A.
Yeah.
We are so hardwired for that.
I know. It makes us feel safe, and that's otherwise things are too disorienting.
It is an evolutionary advantage. When I say that we are physically hardwired, I'm not joking around, right? It is really how we are evolved to perceive unstructured information.
Yeah. These things are like sneakily powerful. They can run your life and you won't even know it, kind of a thing.
That's for sure. And it's not that we want to get rid of them, right? It's like I say, the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And the story I tell myself now at age 60 is very different than the stories I tell myself when I was 30. 40. And the stories I want to tell myself 10 years from now are going to be even different. So the way that we change our who we are, our identity changes. It is a function of the stories we tell ourselves. So we want to get rid of it. It's it's that we need to recognize that is who we are.
Okay. I want to give you a chance to kind of do a little bit of prognostication, because I know you've been doing a lot of thinking about kind of this big data, big compute, LLMs, and sort of what this means for us as human beings, as a society, in a very kind of deep and interesting way. And I was thinking we could. And I just want to be mindful of your time here, but we could take those three avenues that you laid out. One of an understanding of this reality of semantic structures, helping us become more aware, and so that we can sort of navigate, this phenomenon in a healthier way, using it instrumentally. For achieving some objective, and then 3 for
understanding ourselves
in a more intimate and deeper way. These are 3 things that I guess humans have always been doing. We've always been trying to improve our metacognition so that we can be more intelligent navigators. People have always been trying to instrumentalize this for whatever kinds of objectives, and we've always been trying to understand ourselves. Who am I? How do I understand myself? So these are things we've always been doing. What these new technologies, this AI that has come out, that is now advancing so rapidly. How is it going to impact how human beings approach these three eternal purposes?
Yeah.
Maybe you
It's,
can give
it's a
some
great
thoughts.
question, right? So let me talk about each of those three in turn.
Yeah.
So for, I'll say defense, self-defense, defense against the dark arts.
Totally,
right?
totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So you don't need anything fancy for that. All you really need is the recognition that this exists.
Okay.
And just reminding yourself all the time, step back, let's look for that semantic dimension. Doesn't mean you reject or you fight it. You say, nope, I see you. I see you there. This isn't a movie where I'm paying money to suspend disbelief. This is real life, and I need to, not saying you're lying, because you're not. I just need to understand that there's this semantic story here, and I need to separate that out.
Okay.
One very handy thing I use all the time is I always ask myself when I see a story or somebody talks to me about something, I always in the back of my head I ask myself, why am I reading this now? Why is this being presented to me now?
Right? Again, doesn't mean they're lying, doesn't mean they've got bad interest at heart, but there's an instrumentality to the presentation of new information to you. Sometimes the answer is, well, some dude just shot somebody in New York. That's why you're reading about it now. This just happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I get it.
Other times you might say, here's a story about something that happened months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I reading this now?
Mm-hmm.
Just ask yourself that.
Now, you can go beyond that. Like I say, we put up free tools to try to, measure how much different media outlets use this kind of language. And you can look at it by topic area and by media outlet. But the core thing is we can all do this. You don't need special equipment to recognize that this is going on. So that's one. Now, two, the instrumentality part. What I want to recommend to everyone is that you find a way to, whatever your instrumental purpose is, build a company, you want to, achieve some social good, right? Whatever it is, whatever instrumentality you have in the world, the agency you have in the world, putting a back end and a front end onto a large language model and using it as a power source for your instrumental efforts is world changing. World changing. That's the way to think of these language models. Think of them as like a power source, like a combustion engine, a steam engine. Think of it that way.
Could you make that concrete? Like, what is a way an entrepreneur may use an LLM to do this?
I'll talk about our efforts, right? So our company is trying to identify these semantic structures
and then build,
I'll call them dashboards. We call them storyboards.
of
Tracking their waxing and waning over time.
Okay.
And, the way we built these, I'll call them small language models, was by my partner and I, we would think really hard about the problem. Richard Feynman's old saying, how do you solve something? Well, you think really hard about it. That's how you do it.
and
Good advice.
really hard. And we came up with some pretty good ideas for identifying these semantic structures.
But we were missing too much. The signals we were picking up were
Accurate and good, but we
were just missing too much.
Right.
So we incorporate a back end and a front end for large language models and said, hey, large language model, can you find these semantic structures for us? And there's a lot that goes into that, particularly the front end and the back end and making it all work. But we use large language models that are, again, built on semantic structures to help us build a better net to identify semantic structures and transformed what we can do. Transformed. Like, I mean, orders of magnitude improvement in our ability, not to mention the speed and the implementation. I mean, like I say, it's not something you can just do. It takes a lot of work and a lot of people and time to build this stuff, but it's a power source. That's the way to have. It's a power source for anything that has to do with unstructured information or particularly semantic structures. So let me quickly talk about the third. Right? What's I think the most important battle of our future
Is going to be
control over these large language models. I think that the ability to decentralize these language models is the most important thing in the future. Because they are a power source, they are an energy source, and I think decentralizing them, having open source language models, is the most important thing out there today, because we need to have the ability to know ourselves with the assistance of these language models. And if they're in the hands of the state and large corporate interests that are increasingly merged as one, then the ability to control the stories we tell ourselves and to know the stories we tell ourselves,
I think, becomes lost. So
that's what I think, right? So to protect yourself, it really requires just a recognition of the semantic dimension. For instrumental purposes, whatever it is you're trying to build, think about building a front end and a back end on a large language model and using that as an energy source. And for society to protect our autonomy and to know the stories we tell ourselves, it's crucial. It's going to be crucial to have decentralized, open source language models available for all.
Man, I wish we had more time. I'd love to just explore
I'll
this.
come
this
back.
future.
We'll do another podcast. We'll do another one.
Let's call this part one, and then we can
There
we
you
can
go.
do a part two where we pick up on, especially these last two that you said, where we really start using the LLMs in a serious way. Like, what does that future look like, and what are the possibilities? The possible futures that could come out of this. Anyway, Ben, I know you're a busy guy. Thank you for your time, and yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this again. And where can people find you if they want to understand more about your?
I'm Epsilon Theory all over the place. So it's epsilontheory.com and it's Epsilon Theory on Twitter. So
right.
Track me down. I'll be there.
Cool, and we'll definitely put links in the description, etc. The standard stuff. So we'll definitely do that, and looking forward to having you on. I'd love to continue this discussion. Yeah.
Part 2 coming up.
Part 2. Let's do it. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much.